Hello, my name is Camilla Elliott. I teach in the Department of English Literature and Creative Writing at Lancaster University. This workshop looks at some ways in which language is used in courtship in William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. It includes some activities for you to do independently or in discussion with others. Before we begin, the first activity I would like you to do is to think about how people who are romantically interested in each other today communicate with each other. How do they try to attract other people, or how do you? How much of it has to do with language, and how much of it has to do with other things, like images? So take a few moments, think about this question, and write down your thoughts. And when you're ready, move on to the next slide. In Shakespeare's day, language was very important to attracting romantic interest. However, looking and seeing and physical attraction were also essential to romantic love. The language of this play tells us this. In Act 1, Scene 2, where we first meet Romeo, he's lovesick for Rosaline, who does not return his interest. Benvolio, his best friend, who doesn't see Romeo's prospects there as being very likely, encourages him to go and look at other women, to free his eyes from captivity to Rosaline, and to compare her face with other women. He promises, "I will make thee think thy swan a crow when I show you these other women that I know." In a similar way, the first time we meet Juliet in Act 1, Scene 3, her mother, Lady Capulet, is encouraging her to look at Paris, the man that she and her husband have chosen for Juliet to marry, and decide whether she can accept him. She tells her to look at his face, to read over it like a book, and Juliet promises, "I'll look to like if looking, liking move," which means I'll try, and also suggests that she hasn't yet learned the power of looking to make her fall in love, although that will change soon. In the rest of her speech, which you can look up, Lady Capulet makes clear that Paris is not that good looking, but she's pressing his wealth as a way to compensate for his lack of physical attractiveness. When Romeo and Juliet see each other for the first time in Act 1, Scene 5, at a party held at her house, Romeo is bowled over by her beauty. "Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright." He describes her as having beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear. As Benvolio predicted, Romeo sees her, Juliet, as a snowy dove trooping with crows, the other women at the feast. Now Rosaline is there, so Juliet has managed to displace Rosaline from Romeo's attention and affection. And in fact, Romeo realizes that his looking at Rosaline had not generated real love. "Did my heart love till now? Forswear its sight. My eyes have deceived me, for I ne'er saw true beauty till this night." So the point to make here is that looking is really important to romantic love, just as it probably is today in modern courtship practices. But this workshop is part of a series, a playlist, focused on language, and that's what we're going to focus on from here on out. Now it's time for another activity for you. I want you to think and write a bit about what you think of when you hear the word courtship. What does it mean today? Now, if you look it up in the dictionary, courtship is defined as a period in which a couple develops a romantic relationship before committing to marriage. Now, this often happens today outside of marriage. People might test out a relationship before they move in together or decide to go exclusive in a relationship. However, historically, for wealthy families like the Capulets, courtship had much more to do with negotiating between parents than young lovers. It was a process of financial and political negotiation for money and power, rather than an emotional negotiation between two young lovers. You'll see in the play that although Juliet is consulted about whether she is willing to marry Paris by her mother, later on, when she refuses, her father is violently furious and threatening with her, and threatens to disown her. Because of the lack of romance in many higher class marriages of this time, there was a tradition called courtly love, in which men used poetry to attract women to whom they were not married, and often whom they had no chance of marrying. Sometimes the woman was already married, or she might be out of reach in some other way. She might be devoutly religious, she might want to remain single, she might even have died, as Petrarch's Laura had, or she just might not have any interest in the poet. The function of language in poetry was to move the woman, to persuade her to change her mind and return the poet's love, whether sexually, spiritually, or emotionally. Men tried to impress women with dazzling lines of poetry that worshipped them as goddesses, flattered them as beauties, and talked about the heights to which their love, if returned, would send them. So when we first meet Romeo, he's trying to write courtly love poetry for Rosaline. He also tells us that he's offered her saint-seducing gold, money, to try to get her to give her virginity to him, but he's had no success. She isn't interested in him, or she's just determined to keep her virginity for marriage as a source of power for herself, or for whatever reason. Before we look at Romeo's poetry to Rosaline, we need to just quickly do some technical checking in here to understand what a successful sonnet is, what the ingredients are. So there were two major kinds, as you can see from the slide. The English sonnet, which is sometimes called Elizabethan, sometimes even Shakespearean sonnet, is the one we're most concerned with here. And this has to have these ingredients. 14 lines of iambic pentameter, that's a meter with a stressed and unstressed syllable. You can remember this by 5 times I am, I am, I am, I am, I am. 3 quatrains, those are sections of 4 lines each. They're all in one row. They wouldn't have line breaks. And a final rhyming couplet at the end. On this slide you can see the expected rhyme scheme, right? And on the right you'll see the requirements for a Petrarchan sonnet, should you be interested in that as well. So let's have a look at how Romeo's sonnet is going. Well, it's an absolute sonnet fail. You'll see right away that the first quatrain, the first 4 lines, isn't following the rhyme pattern. If you keep looking at the rhyme scheme on the right, as the lines emerge here, you'll see they're all over the place, and that the sonnet doesn't even get to 14 lines, doesn't even finish. These are by no means the only technical problems. I've talked a bit about his writing in the language and character playlist, but I'm going to go into it again and with a bit more detail here. Okay, he's trying to write clever wordplay. He's trying to play around with different images, but his writing makes almost no sense, just enough sense to laugh at it, really. So we start out, alas, that love, whose view is muffled still. Well, a view isn't muffled, it's hearing that gets muffled, and he's confusing the senses of sight and sound. And then in the next line, should without eyes see pathways to his will. How can anyone see without eyes? At least not in this kind of line. Then all of a sudden, he's hungry. He's a young man. Where shall we dine? And then he notices that there was fighting here. There's evidence and vestiges of the fight that happened in Act 1, Scene 1. Oh me, what fray was here? Yet tell me not, for I have heard it all. So he's asking questions, but he doesn't want to hear the answers. He says he already knows it. And he's sort of undoing the words he's creating with these kinds of retreats. Now, what's really interesting to me is the fifth line is an incredibly famous line. It's quoted everywhere. It's one of the most beautiful lines in the play. Here's much to do with hate, but more with love. And it shows that he's got the potential to write good poetry, but then he goes off into the oxymorons that I talked about in the language and character video. Brawling hate, brawling love, loving hate, heavy lightness, serious vanity, anything, nothing. These are all opposites that he's trying to hold in tension. But rather than creating some deeply meaningful, profound tension between opposites, it's just rather clumsy, it's rather random. Some of them make absolutely no sense. What does make sense is the next line, misshapen chaos of well-seeming forms. It's the perfect description for his poetry. He's trying to use the well-seeming forms, rhetorical devices like oxymoron, but doing it atrociously. And then it just gets worse. Feather of lead, bright smoke, cold fire, sick health. Not only are these physical impossibilities, they're very earthbound, very literal. Nothing like the kind of transcendental poetry that the best sonnets of the day used, or even the brilliantly witty lines that brilliant sonneteers used. There's very little worship of Rosaline here. In fact, she doesn't really feature at all, which suggests, maybe the focus really isn't Rosaline, it's just his teenage hormones. And it's no surprise that at the end of this failed sonnet, he turns to Benvolio, dost thou not laugh? His sonnet is laughable. He knows that it is. He knows that it's ridiculous and contradictory. And he also knows that there's something wrong with his feelings, as well as his poetry, in those confused lines leading up to the final line 13. He's not really in love. He doesn't really know how to describe it because he's not really feeling it. Romeo's first successful sonnet is co-created with Juliet. This is an absolutely radical idea for so many reasons. First of all, young women were not expected to be writing poetry. The traditions were not just in the poetry where the woman was written to by the man, but also just in society, who was expected to write poetry. That this young girl who's not even 14 years old yet would be co-authoring a poem at all, let alone with a young man of whom her parents do not approve in so many ways, is even more radical. And that this model of co-creating a sonnet is a model of love as well as poetry. The idea is that the love isn't a one-way affair, but it's two ways. And so the poetry is the same as well. Here it is, Romeo's first successful sonnet co-created with Juliet. It's not surprising that he uses religious imagery to discuss romantic love, because sonnets were used to worship God as well as to worship women. And they often exchanged metaphors. So we have poems to God which talk about romantic and even erotic desire. We have poems to women where they're being worshipped as divine beings. So Romeo starts with a pretty conventional metaphor that presents himself as a pilgrim and Juliet as a saint. Only what's really funny about his reference to the shrine is that he is so desperate to have physical contact with a female he's attracted to, that he clumsily makes the shrine her hand, and he wants to hold it. Now, you wouldn't normally be holding a shrine, but this is, audiences at the time would have found this physical eagerness really kind of touching and quite comical as well. And most actors playing Romeo here would grab Juliet's hand when he says, "If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this." What's equally touching and comical is he immediately begins to apologize for having taken the liberty of seizing her hand. At the same time, he's not letting go of it, and he's actually going further to introduce two new pilgrims, his two lips, who are there ready to kiss her hand. What's funny is he's saying, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have taken this liberty of grabbing your hand, but the way I'm going to make up for it is I'm going to take an even greater liberty. I'm going to kiss it." Juliet is equally charming. She's very unlike the cold, distant, unmoved, courtly lady that Rosaline has played for Romeo. In calling Romeo good pilgrim, she makes clear that she doesn't see him as having done anything bad, but that he's actually showing what she calls mannerly devotion. She acknowledges that saints, statues of saints, are touched, their hands are touched by pilgrims' hands. However, she's pushing him back a bit by saying palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. Palmers is another word for pilgrims. She's very good with language, much better than Romeo here. And she just wants the hands to stay touching. She doesn't really want to go further. And here Romeo kind of loses the poetry in his desperation and becomes extremely clumsy and literal. "Have not saints lips and holy palmers too?" Right? And Juliet pushes him back again. "I, pilgrim, lips that they must use in prayer." What she's asking here is interesting to me. She's asking him to use his lips to speak to her, to give her more poetry. But he's got a one-track mind, and he just keeps pressing his metaphor, his rather literal metaphor, and he has a brainwave. "Oh then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do. They pray." The idea is, let's put our lips together just like we have our hands put together. The audience would have been rolling on the floor laughing at this. And Juliet, interestingly, she's not quite willing to just throw herself to kiss him mutually. She's keeping the metaphor of being a statue and being still and allowing him to kiss her. She's going to grant his prayer and not moving. She's not going to run away. And so Romeo falls over himself in his desperation to kiss her. And we see here a stage direction, a very rare occurrence in Shakespeare's plays. He wanted to leave it in no doubt that they did kiss each other. Jump up 2 lines. We have this "lest faith turn to despair." There's a dark note in the middle of a really sweet, touching, comical, natural, spontaneous teenage exchange of words and bodies modestly in love here. He was despairing when we first saw him. He's lost his interest in life. He's so lovesick. And later on, we're going to see a more profound despair when society begins to militate against them, as well as his own actions, loyalties, and behaviors. Well, the sonnet is over, and the first kiss has been granted, but they're still talking, they're still rhyming. If you think about rhymes, that's a kind of coupling, a coupling of sounds, and they're coupling lines of poetry. Romeo goes back to the metaphor. He is hugely relieved. He's finally got a kiss. It's almost like there's some real physical release that's happened for him. "Thus from my lips by thine my sin is purged." But Juliet's starting perhaps to feel a little bit guilty here. This isn't really how young girls were supposed to behave. And she worries that her lips have the sin that he had, and they've taken that sin. Now Romeo gets his biggest laugh from the audience. He's coming back for more. Sin from my lips? Oh, trespass sweetly urged. Give me my sin again. And he kisses her again. Juliet's getting a little bit skeptical of his wordplay. Feels it's a bit technical. You kiss by the book. Now, I don't know if you've encountered study materials that try to teach Shakespeare by modernizing the dialogue. But I'm going to give you an example here of one that I've seen in several different places. And I want to think about what's lost by modernizing. So here we go. Romeo. I love holding your hand. May I kiss it? Juliet. I like it that you're holding my hand. Okay, so what have we lost? We've lost so much already in these lines. That is a kind of reductive interpretation of the speech. And then, bizarrely, we've got Romeo saying, pilgrims have lips, they kiss too. Please let me kiss you. Now, if somebody came up to you at school or at a party and started talking to you about pilgrims, you'd wonder if they were still sane. And this is a kind of insane way to modernize. What you have to do is to make contemporary metaphors that are going to resonate in today's language, not use metaphors that a lot of people don't relate to and don't understand about pilgrims. And we go on with this pilgrim metaphor. And then when Romeo says, I'm praying to you to let me kiss you. If you don't, I might lose my religious faith. I mean, this is a complete lack of understanding about how sonnets use religious metaphors for romantic purposes. Romeo's sense of despair that we talked about is entirely to do with not being loved and not having women respond to his love and respond to his poetry. It's nothing to do with his religious faith. So we go down the Coy Juliet and the passionate Romeo. He's holding her, he's kissing her. And then he goes, I got rid of my sin by kissing you. Again, this makes absolutely no sense. Even in the metaphor, we've got so many pieces missing. And Juliet goes on, I've got your sin, what are you going to do about that? You want me to kiss you again? Okay. You don't have to go through all of this just to kiss me, just do it. This I saw years ago, actually. It's still on the internet today. But it was in the time the Nike, the Just Do It ad campaign. So I want you to think about, what have we lost in the modern translation that was there? And I don't just mean words or details. We've lost way more than that. We've lost the laughter, we've lost the humor, we've lost the sense and the sanity of the speech. We don't see how hilariously desperate Romeo is for some kind of physical encounter with a woman. We don't see how admirable Juliet is, how clever she is with words, and how spontaneous and natural she is. We're much less invested in characters who make a ridiculous hodgepodge of old-fashioned metaphors and contemporary casual conversation. There isn't chemistry, there isn't passion in that modernization. And we also lose our admiration for the play and what Shakespeare has written. At this point, I would like to encourage you to do some writing of your own. And I've got a few suggestions here, but you could actually write anything that you've been inspired to write by reading and thinking about the language of courtship that we've looked at. So you could write an Elizabethan-style sonnet, but perhaps using metaphors that make sense today. Or if you think, well, that's a bit incongruous, you've got an old-fashioned form and contemporary metaphors, write a free verse poem. Write a dialogue if you don't want to write a poem between two people. Get them sparring a bit like Romeo and Juliet do. If you prefer, you can write with a friend or a group of friends or in a group in your classroom. You can sit down and talk about what metaphors would we use today to talk about attraction and love, and how would we write or speak in order to try and get somebody to respond to our attraction to them. So writing is often a very important way of investing. But I don't want you to miss the conclusion. So if you'd rather do the writing at the end, I'm going to make a surprising conclusion, and one that is really unexpected given all we've been talking about, the two young lovers. At the beginning of this workshop, I mentioned that courtship, in the time that this play was set and also the time it was written, had a lot more to do with families negotiating with each other than lovers exchanging looks and words and touches with each other. They negotiated about money and power and so forth. And this is also the interest of the play. For all of the charming dialogue between Romeo and Juliet, and there's a lot more romantic language in this play, the plot of the play is much more interested in the marriage of families. And I don't mean Juliet's family with Paris's family. I mean the marriage that heals the feud between the Montagues and the Capulets, between Romeo's family and Juliet's family, and in the healing of problems and rifts in society. The young lovers are there, but not in and of themselves to find love. They are essential to healing the rift, just as the sacrifice of Christ, the Son, was made to heal the rift between the Father and humankind. So Shakespeare's play is about the sacrifice of the young for the sins of the old. It's full of youth culture. We have young people brawling in the streets. We've got disillusioned young people, Romeo in Act 1, Scene 2, and Mercutio later in the play, particularly in the speech he makes with Queen Mab and the fairies in it. We have youth partying, as they do when they go to the feast. We have armed youth. We have youth going around with weapons ready to fight. We have youth sacrificed to make alliances between families. Juliet's marriage to Paris we've mentioned. We have young people inheriting the wars that their parents have started and being expected to fight them. And it's not just Romeo and other young men. Juliet's expected to avoid people from the other side and not to fall in love with them. If you've seen film adaptations, chances are you may have seen an adaptation that explores the play in relation to the youth culture of the period in which it was written. In the 1960s, we have Franco Zeffirelli's film of Romeo and Juliet, made about the youth culture in the context of the Vietnam War. You've probably seen Baz Luhrmann's film of the play, and you'll recall how much that explores youth culture of the 1990s and the turn of the 20th century. We have in films, but also returning to the play now, we have youth being self-destructive. It's not just that their parents are sacrificing them. They are being self-destructive as well. I spoke about Juliet's self-destructive language in the workshop on this playlist, Language and Character. And we also have Mercutio. There are many critics who think that he allowed Tybalt to kill him because he was feeling so much disillusionment and despair. Finally, you'll see we have this young love and really young death to heal political divisions. And this is something we can think about today in 2020. We have young people all over the world trying to get governments to think about and respond to the problems of climate change. We have young people all over the world protesting corrupt political power, and many running for political office. We have the Black Lives Matter movement and other movements that are out to make change and to challenge corrupt abuse of power. So although this workshop workshop has been focused on young love and the language of young love and young courtship in the larger context, not just of Shakespeare's play and his society, but societies after that time, societies today. We have the motif of young people and young passion and young idealism being there, attempting to healing rifts in society, but also perhaps young people being sacrificed on the altar of adult corruption. There's lots more you can look at. Here are some resources you might want to take a look at, and there are plenty more online as well. Thank you for watching, listening, and participating in this workshop. If you're interested in learning more about what it's like to study English literature or creative writing or both at university, you can start with our website. We also have an email address. Feel free to contact us with questions and with feedback.